So back in 1992, April 28th, 1992, I began a 30-day month of silence. I did it because I wasn't sure which direction I was being called to go in, and I couldn't seem to get it in normal everyday life, so I decided to retreat from the world. And in order to do that takes preparation. I had no more school, no more job for that 30 days, contact all my family, my friends, no contact. I'm just going to be for 1 month in stillness. And I was very structured. I wouldn't let myself lay down during the day. I would no TV, no radio. And on April 28th when it started, so I planned it. I was committed. April 28th it starts, and I'm going for a walk. And I live in, by the way, at the time, Brentwood in Los Angeles. And in the walk, there's someone who's in their car. It's a parked car, and their door's open, and they're listening to the radio. And a bunch of people are circling the car listening to the radio, and it's very loud, so everyone can hear it. And what I'm hearing is something about riots in L.A. And I'm sort of wondering what that's all about. And down the street from where I live, there'd always been this brown building, and there never seemed to be any activity there, but suddenly I'm seeing tanks come out. I've just started my month of silence. I'm supposed to be in bliss here, and I'm seeing tanks, what I've never seen before. But I made a commitment. My commitment was to the divine presence. So I also got a call, my brother left a message, are you okay, are you okay? So I knew something was happening, but I chose not to follow that. I already had made the commitment not to watch TV or radio, so either I was going to have to break that to find out what was going on, or I just stayed committed to this presence and this power of which I knew my life was here for. No excuses, non-negotiable, show up to what we are committed to. And it was only in retrospect, long after this fear and all of the intensity of that issue, and the immediacy of it anyways, was all over, did I learn about what was happening about the Rodney King verdict and the LA riots. As we are dealing with this virus, we have a choice. Where's our attention going to go? Is it going to go follow all the news reports about everything that's unfolding day in and day out, and the fear and the anxiety, or are we committed to that divine presence and power that is the source of all life, that is always whole, perfect, and complete, that is always good? Do we stand in that knowing and that awareness day in and day out? Not just day in and day out, but hour after hour, because now with social media and internet, even if you're not on social media, you'll get little things coming about. I get news reports about the virus all the time. I'm not seeking it out. It just pops up on my screen. The latest breaking news. So it is a constant commitment, non-negotiable, no matter what. My commitment to know the wholeness and the power and the presence of pure spirit. To stand in that truth. That doesn't mean we don't wash our hands. That doesn't mean we don't follow the protocol in this world. Because it's both and. We want to live in the both and world. So there is this relative world that's happening, and we don't want to ignore it. I had the opportunity in that 30 days to sort of ignore it because I was off on my own, because the riots didn't hit my neighborhood. Basically, that's why I could ignore it. If the riots were in my neighborhood, I would have had to take action, but at the same time keep my commitment, because I was clear no matter what, I was going to do this commitment. So we keep our commitments and at the same time do the things that we need to do in the relative world, but not think about them, not get obsessed with them, not let it run ourselves. So I wanted to bring that up just as we're dealing with the virus and having all these reports, that we have a choice in every moment of where our attention goes, that we can do the practical guidelines and keep our attention on pure spirit, the infinite love intelligence of the universe. But there's another reason why I bring that up. Because when I've told people about the 30-day month of silence, people say, well, did you do it with an organization or did you go somewhere? No, I just did it in my apartment by myself. And I recognize there's a sense of authority that I had, a feeling like I don't need to ask anyone's permission to do this. I don't need to join an organization or have someone lead me on how to do this. I could just do this on my own. I'm perfectly capable. And I believe so much of that feeling tone came from both my own family, taught me to think for myself, but at the same time, was in the New Thought movement at this time. I'd been going to the Santa Anita Church, taking their New Thought classes. I'd started reading Deepak Chopra in the late 80s. So I'd already been reading a lot of these New Thought ideas. And one of the great things about the New Thought ideas is their independence of thinking. That we don't need to look to an organization, a book, or a teacher for our authority, but the divine presence within us. This month we're talking about the divine feminine in all. And it's really been working me a lot. What does that even mean? And I'm going to go into more of that probably next week, because I was really struggling about what to talk about today, and really addressing what is the divine feminine and why is that important or not. We'll talk about it next week. But today the topic was divine legacy. And one of the great things about the New Thought history, for those of you who don't know, we're an organization called Centers for Spiritual Living. There is an umbrella called New Thought. New Thought is an umbrella, like Protestant is the umbrella for Baptist, Episcopal, Presbyterian, Lutheran, Congregationalist. Protestant is the umbrella for that. New Thought is the umbrella for Centers for Spiritual Living, Unity, Divine Science. There's a lot of independent New Thought churches, like the Santa Anita Church where I first went. That was an independent New Thought church. Christian Science, a little bit, sort of, on the edges. But all the teachers that many of you are familiar with, Wayne Dyer, Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, they're all under this umbrella of New Thought. The wonderful power of New Thought is that not only do we have a whole history of teachers, so many of the teachers are women. There is a legacy of female teachers and founders and starting new organizations in New Thought in a way that is powerful and strong. I remember when I was in 11th grade, my dad wanted me to go to Andover Summer School, which I did not want to go to, because it was like classes. I had to pick a major and a minor, and there's nothing appealing about it. But he was afraid I was never going to leave home. So he wanted a practice trial so I wouldn't freak out when I went to college. So I went to Andover, and our family was in Virginia Beach, and my dad and I did a 3-day drive up to Massachusetts, where Andover was. And in those 3 days, he told me all of our family history. And my dad loved family history, so we had discussions. Were we part of the slave trade? We have a lot of English heritage, the Hawkins. There's some names of Hawkins, so we had talks about that. And then we went to my Amos Jackson, who was, some position in the Army. He ran an all-black unit in the Union Army. And just one story after another, not just who beget who, but all these stories, these family stories. And it just went on and on for 3 days. That's all we did, was he just told me family history. And I'll never forget when I arrived at Andover, this incredible feeling of confidence, of feeling rooted, of feeling strong, because I had all this history behind me. I had this whole family history that was mine, that I could stand on. And it was the first time I had many Jewish friends where they would always talk about their roots, and I always thought had thought, why do they put so much emphasis on roots? But in that moment, I got it. It gave me a sense of belonging and anchoredness, so that when I entered into the Andover Summer School, I came with a level of freedom and joy and confidence that I had not experienced previously. I thought, wow, this is really important to know one's roots. And I had an amazing, wonderful time, one of my favorite summers ever. So as we're looking at the divine feminine, looking at the legacy of the divine feminine in the New Thought traditions, I don't know how many of you know about the New Thought tradition. Yeah, Frank Mesmer, and then come over here to America, and there's a whole bunch. Phineas Quimby. There's a book called Spirits of Rebellion. There's actually a lot of books about New Thought history. That was the one when I took the history of New Thought in ministerial school. That's the book we used, was the Spirits of Rebellion, which is perfect. Has anyone ever felt like they were one of the rebellious spirits? Yeah, so you're home. And because my dad was so into history, and I was constantly having to read history books growing up, when I got to this class in ministerial school, I did not greet it with joy and excitement, but like, oh no, more history. And what I found is even though I had resistance to it, it's the class that has stuck with me. It's one of the classes that has stuck with me the most. Just the stories of hearing about, we didn't just show up here in the 2000s. There's a really powerful history which we were birthed from on the shoulders on whom we are standing, which goes back to ancient Greece, but certain and both in religion and philosophy, but certainly in America from the late 1700s all through the 1800s. We had people who were standing in their power long before we got here. Now, women, as I was mentioning last week, women, that feminine energy has always been powerful. I don't abide by the idea that the women's power is returning. The feminine face of God is returning. It's always been here. It just hasn't been recognized. For those of you, I at least find on social media a lot of people posting, they did in February, Black History Month, and this month with women, just tons of history of how people of color, how women have impacted history, stories that I never knew about. And it's extraordinary. It's always been there. We just never put our attention on it. We never actually paid attention, but it's always been there. And how powerful and energizing it is to feel that connection. So in the New Thought history, one of the first organizers of a New Thought teaching was Mary Baker Eddy, who founded Christian Science. And what an interesting person she was. She grew up very ill. They said she would fall on the floor and shake, and sometimes she would just stop. I mean, to me, they sound like symptoms of epilepsy. But they didn't know what to do with her. She was very passionate already as a child and would get into these huge battles with her dad. And because the normal medicine wasn't helping her, she was always seeking out other forms of healing. She tried hypnotism. She tried spiritualism. Eventually, Mary Baker Eddy, for those of you who know Christian Science, created Christian Science and dismissed any type of healing other than through pure spirit. What was happening is because the medical system wasn't what it is today, there were people who were sick or having illnesses, and they were looking how to heal. And one of the places they were looking was the Bible. They were looking at how did Jesus heal? What was he doing? So they were trying to do it scientifically. What were the acts? What were the words? What was the spirit? What was happening that allowed for these cures to happen to people? And from reading and studying the Bible, making it science. So you're going to hear a lot of, if you look back in the history of New Thought, you hear a lot of Christian and science together, mental science, Christian science, because Jesus was one of the ways they were really trying to emulate. How do we heal? And so Mary Baker Eddy became more and more dogmatic about it, that this was the only way to do it was pure spirit, because Jesus never talked about medicines. He didn't worry about hygiene. He didn't tell people to wash hands. He just healed by pure spirit, so that's what you had to do. And like all great leaders, women are no exception. She's got a whole bunch of shadow side that comes out later. Was she addicted to morphine? I remember having these conversations in our New Thought class. Mary Baker Eddy never used medicine, but she was addicted to morphine. Was she addicted to morphine? Was this a rumor? There's all sorts of, our history is so full of humanity, just like anything else. And but what she offered was a whole new way of doing it. Phineas Quimby did too, but she organized it, which always gets more people involved. She has many students. I don't know if you know Joe Goldsmith, one of my favorites. He was one of her students. Emma Curtis Hopkins was one of her students. Both of them ended up leaving and starting their own paths. Emma Curtis Hopkins became the teacher of teachers. This is in the 1800s. She's teaching people how to heal themselves through pure spirit, through this mental science. Joel Goldsmith was a little later. He didn't study with Mary Baker directly, but he went off and did his healing method a little bit differently and not so dogmatically. But Emma taught Myrtle Fillmore, who had tuberculosis. Remember, I've talked about her before in the 1800s, cured herself of tuberculosis. Cures are happening. I don't know if I don't think the scientific method was fully used, so I'm not sure. I don't think they necessarily talked about the people who weren't cured, but they certainly talked about a lot of people who were cured. And it was powerful, and it's had a powerful impact on this country. And then just as you start going into the 1900s, there's Elizabeth Town. She and her husband were on the board. First of all, a lot of these women had very strong husbands too, and they worked in partnership. It was fantastic. They're part of the suffragette movement. These are women who stepped out in the world. So Elizabeth Town was on the board of INTA, International New Thought Alliance, and then she became the president of International New Thought Alliance in the 1920s, a woman president. We have the Nona Brooks. Well, actually, it was Kramer, Melinda Kramer, I believe her name was. She started Divine Science, which I love. There was a church in D.C. that I used to go to, but basically the Nona Brooks and Althea Brooks were the sisters that sort of took over Divine Science and really grew it and got it part of INTA, again, early 1900s. These are incredibly strong, powerful women. Alec Wheeler Wilcox, who wrote books on New Thought, poetry. I love, one of my favorite things that I remember about Ella Wilcox is that she only referred to her husband as her lover. She would never introduce him as her husband. This is my lover. That's pretty saucy for the early 1900s. These are women who were just fully themselves. They were not defined by the world around them. I know I'm forgetting the Nona Brooks sisters. Well, I know there's... This is one reason why people use notes. When you talk about history, it's easy to forget. But these are women who showed up fully and powerfully as themselves because they believe and taught and practiced. Oh, I know, Emily Cady wrote Lessons of Truth, the core foundation book in Unity. So, it's just amazing. My invitation, please, all you have to do is Google women in New Thought or New Thought women, and just start clicking on all these different women. Just read their Wikipedia page. Just learn a little bit about all of them. What they were practicing is the divine presence is within them. Again, no intermediary. No one has to tell them who they are or how they're supposed to show up or what's the right way to be. They're listening to the divine presence within them, and in knowing that that is their authority, they could stand up in the world and take positions of power. I don't know if did I mention Elizabeth Town also ran for mayor of her town? They were involved in New Thought, but often they went way beyond New Thought and were getting very involved in what was happening in the world and society and participating because there was this strength, this ownership. And this was happening. We don't hear about this history, but this is the history. This is the lineage of New Thought. I remember one of the things that Ken Wilber would say in Integral Theories, he said, well, you have to know your lineage because lineage actually, we all have roots. And I remember asking myself for a long time, what's my lineage? I'm not sure what are my roots because I did come from a family of independent thinkers, and there's always this sense of, well, I'm just making it up on my own. That's total arrogance. But there is that sense because we're finding this individual path or finding our own way. Well, I just did this on my own. Jack and I are doing this, well, he's really doing it, the Plant Strong class. I'm just riding on his coattails. But one of the things that Rip Esselstyn, who is in his 50s, he has these podcasts on Plant Strong. What I love so much, is at the end of every podcast, he says, and I give thanks to all those who came before me. I stand on their shoulders. And he includes his dad, because his dad is a doctor at Cleveland Clinic who was starting this way of eating as a way to cure back in the 80s, long before the medical world was even beginning to look at the power of food, and he was just fighting against the system. But just the fact that he ends every one of his podcasts recognizing his roots, recognizing the shoulders upon which we stand, because that gives us power, that gives us strength. As I was struggling about what to say today or what to talk about, someone last night actually was saying, well, we'll talk about the women of New Thought. And I hadn't thought to do that, but just in thinking about it, I suddenly felt this incredible power and strength in my own being. One of the things that I've heard so many of you say, and so we're alike in that way, which is, I like stuff that I'm learning, but I'm so different. I'm sort of different than everyone in the class, or I have my own way of doing things. And followed by that is, so where do I really belong? Where am I going to find people who's just like me? And that's why I love that reading today. As I've been looking at the divine feminine, it's not just the divine feminine, what I'm going to talk about, you can't really separate the divine feminine and masculine, they're completely intertwined, is that no matter what degree we are on that, I'm a woman, I'm different than every woman in this room. There's no place where I'm going to say, I'm just like, there's a category, and we all fit in one category, and it makes sense. We're this incredible, variable, individual, unique expression. That was the reading today, individualization. So we're going to feel that when I'm in the class and I start expressing myself, I'm kind of like other people, but I'm sort of different than other people. And what do we do with that? I know I felt that even being part of Centers for Spiritual Living, that we're working, as we talked about, the ordination, and I've looked at, am I going to be part of CSL, Centers for Spiritual Living? Because one of my struggles has been, though I align in many ways with the spirit of Ernest Holmes. I love to synthesize. I love to think about many different things. I love the oneness. I love the symbol. I love the what we call prayer treatment, affirmative prayer. There's so much I love about what he says. There's so many times I could quote him and say, that just... In fact, I have to say one thing. He was... someone pointed this out, and I didn't know. I've never seen this sentence. I should. Well, never mind. I'll use it next week. So he has a really great sentence about the masculine and feminine. So he was so ahead of his time in so many ways, and for whatever reason, I don't get excited reading his books. You know, I can't. I've tried so many times to read a whole book from cover to cover, and I just sort of lose interest over time. And there's things I agree with and things I don't agree with, and I don't feel like my call to ministry is a call to promote earnest teaching. And that's made me nervous. So I've wondered, well, where do I belong? So just like many of you often feel when you're sharing your path or your way, well, I kind of fit, but not totally. And that's how I feel with Centers for Spiritual Living. I love the people. I've been in this organization for almost 30 years now. I love the people. I love the connection. I love the community. I know this teaching backward and forward. I know the history of it. I love all of it, but where do I fit as an individual? And as I was reading all these New Thought women, I'm like, I so belong, because that's what New Thought women have been doing for over 100 years now. They've been claiming their own truth. They haven't said, I have to follow anybody else. They stood and said, this is who I am. My source is the same source as every one of your source. I have the same source as Mohammed and Jesus and Buddha and Kuan Yin and Kali and all the incredible goddesses of New Thought. That we are all answering that same infinite love intelligence. We're all connecting with that same presence. So we all belong to that one power and that one presence. And at the same time, what that demands of us as we continue to evolve is to speak up as our own individual unique self. That we are not here to mirror or imitate anybody else. And that's the very essence of what this teaching is about, what this community is about. Even when we say organization, it starts to feel stifling, but when we say community, it feels alive, like the living spirit, that we all absolutely belong, are absolutely called to know the one power, one presence. No excuses, non-negotiable, one power, one presence. That is the source of my life every single day. That is the place for which I return to over and over and over. No excuses, and from that one power, one presence, that own unique voice will emerges. And we stand in the power, and we have music like that today. You know, that just, I am my own person. I let go of fear, and I stand in the truth of who I am. You know? That was powerful. And that's what's happening, I think, today more and more with all the diversity of people whose histories we haven't heard or stories we haven't heard. They're speaking up and they're telling their stories. We're telling the stories of the women and the people of color and people of different sexual orientations. We're here to speak out that which is never spoken, and that demands that even as we tell other people's story, we have to tell our story. We have to speak our truth. And so the power of that living legacy is to feel that, to recognize that we're not just doing this suddenly out of nowhere, but this has been happening for eons. Women have been speaking up. They have been doing things. We just haven't noticed or haven't read their books or listened to their talks. But they've been out there. They've been speaking. They've been writing poetry. They've been creating art. They've been doing so many incredible things. And we have to notice. Because the more we notice them, it empowers us to stand in our truth. That we're not alone. We have this whole history and lineage and heritage of which we belong. And we belong today, in this moment, as our unique, beautiful, radiant selves. Are you with me? All right. So this week, let's continue to stand in our unique truth, to know our individual self, to not apologize for who we are, to be respectful and kind and generous to other people whose stories are different than ours, who have different perspectives and different ways of being, and to bow and to see the divine in them, even as they bow and see the divine in us. And if you have an opportunity, please Google New Thought Women. And just start learning about this beautiful legacy of which we are all part of. And by the way, the men are just as powerful and wonderful and supportive. They have walked side by side, the women and the men, which is a beautiful thing in an organization. From the beginning, from all these beginning of these organizations, the feminine and the masculine have been walking side by side. Let's pray. So let us begin this prayer today. As we begin all prayers, non-negotiable. No excuses, no matter what. We remember that there is only one power, one presence, one love, one joy, one beauty, one intelligence. It is beyond anything we could ever humanly imagine. So when we say oneness, it is beyond anything that's possible in terms of measurement or comparison, because there's nothing, if there's only one, there's nothing to measure or compare. There is no other. There is only this one power, this one presence. It is not somewhere more than it is right here and right now. It has never been somewhere in time more than it is right now. It is not in another person more than it is right here in the center of all of our beings, right here and right now. That all the power, all the love, all the peace, all the wisdom, all the presence that has ever been and ever will be is right now in the center of our beingness, in the center of our consciousness. That has no walls, that has no borders, that has no limits. And we anchor ourselves in this one power, in this presence, knowing that it is always perfect health. It is always wholeness. It is always good, where there is no opposite, where there is no other, where it is always being of itself. It doesn't come and it doesn't go. It is always fully alive and awake as all creation. It is full of the masculine and feminine energy and beyond what we call masculine and feminine energy. It is everything. It is everything, and we anchor ourselves in that presence and that awareness right here and right now as we anchor ourselves in this prayer of oneness throughout our day, throughout our weeks, throughout our months. Non-negotiable, no excuses, no matter what. One power, one presence, absolute, whole, perfect, and complete. This is who we are right here, right now. Nothing is missing, nothing is lacking, nothing needs to be fixed, nothing needs to be changed. It is all perfect right here, right now. And as we anchor ourselves in this extraordinary vastness of oneness that cannot be described by human words, we allow ourselves to feel it through our hearts, feel this power and this presence through our heart, through our bodies, through our stories, through everything that has made us uniquely us. And we celebrate this oneness and this power as individualized as every life form on this planet. We see with the heart of the mother and welcome and embrace all creation, all form, as this beautiful expression of the Divine One. We accept all of it. There is no place where we say there's more deserving than something else. It all is absolutely fully alive in pure love. And as we know this about all creation, we know that all creation is a reflection of everything that is happening within our own consciousness. We accept everything within our own consciousness as the divine presence and the divine love. We allow that uniqueness to shine forth. We allow ourselves to have a different perspective, to be a little bit different than our neighbors, than our family, than our friends. We allow ourselves our perspective that might feel a little awkward sometimes. And at the same time, we know our absolute oneness. We live in the world of both and, of the absolute and the relative, of the oneness and the uniqueness of all life. We stand in that power, and we are unwilling to be quieted. We are unwilling to hide in the corner anymore. We are stepping out in our own unique voice and are being willing to be seen. We tell our stories. We tell our truth. We tell our way of experiencing and seeing and feeling into this beautiful world of ours, because every one of our voices is essential to this time and this place. None of us are here by accident. We are all the divine idea birthing itself and calling itself to be spoken out into the world. Each and every one of us is the yes of pure spirit. We are needed, we are essential, and we are alive now in this. We stand in that power. We stand in the power of knowing who and what we are, and we don't back down. We allow all fear to disintegrate into the nothingness from which it came. We allow all sense of not enoughness to dissolve into the nothingness from which it came, and what stands is the wholeness and the truth of our divine being. I celebrate and I give thanks for this. As we know and accept that there are people who are in our own lives who are going through challenges. We may be going through deep challenges, whether they're physical, emotional, mental. We continue to see and know the wholeness and the perfection in the midst. We don't deny what is happening. We open our hearts and we feel into that experience. We feel with compassion and love and tenderness to all those different aspects of our being that might feel hurt, that might have been wounded emotionally, physically, or mentally. We open our heart to all of it. We hope in and feel and allow the Divine Mother to tenderly caress and care for us, to hold us and to comfort us and to nurture us. And never, ever forgetting who we really are. Each and every one of us are kings and queens of pure spirit. So into deep and abiding peace of this power of knowing of who and what we really are, we celebrate and we give thanks for it. We celebrate and give thanks for our voice this very day, speaking our light, our wholeness, our truth into the world, knowing it is needed exactly right now. In deep abiding gratitude, we let this word be now. We just let it go. We release, we release, we release, we let it be, and we say, and so it is. Amen and amen.